Hi, everyone. I'm Rita Garwood, editor-in-chief of Monitor. Joining me on the podcast today is Allard Pheifer. Allard is global lead of sustainability at CHG-MERIDIAN. Allard, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for allowing me here.
So let's just start with the basics. From your perspective, why is ESG still a priority for C-suite leaders, even in the political climate that we're having here in the United States?
Well, I think the most important thing, so I rather speak of sustainability instead of ESG. And the reason I rather speak of sustainability because it kind of has a broader picture on the topic of value. From the perspective, what does sustainability actually means to me or to our organization? It's more the triple P perspective. So it's about people, planet, and profit. And all these three segments can be divided in all kinds of parameters and eventually can be expressed in value. So as an organization, which always, of course, has that prime goal of being a profitable organization from a monetary point of view, you also need to arrange all kinds of other stuff to make sure that you're profitable. And that's value. So, for instance, you need people within your organization who understand and know and are accountable for what they're doing. You need all kinds of instruments, tools, you need investments, and eventually you need customers and for your products and services. So all this can be expressed in value. And from that point of view, sustainability is measured in value from a people's perspective, a planet perspective, but also from a profits perspective. So why is ESG, as explained mainly on the US side, so important? Because it holds all kinds of opportunities. And what you see, and that's also what you see happening with the larger corporations within the US, they understood that it's no longer a risk that you have to manage, but it's actually an opportunity that you can harness. And if you do that smartly from the triple P perspective, yeah, there's huge opportunities to strengthen your organization, be more profitable, but also attract the right employees and mainly keep your customer base happy and also make sure you de-risks the investment of your investors. So ESG, if perceived from a value perspective, is extremely important to organization. If you perceive ESG as something, "Ah, I have to do this, but it costs me money," then you don't understand actually the true value of sustainability.
So looking at sustainability from the lessor's perspective, what kind of role does it play in the equipment finance industry today?
And mainly to make sure. So in our organization, again, we speak also of a linear economy versus circular economy. So the linear economy, that's where we are, that has brought us where we are today, has been very successful in the last 250 years, yeah, up from starting the industrial revolution up till now. But the linear economy is a take, make, waste linear way of doing business. It's like living on the credit card of Mother Nature. But in order to be successful, you kind of need to take care of Mother Nature because that's where also your customer base lives in. And this is also where you harness all kinds of materials to get your products up and running. Or at least you need, if you're a service provider, you need Mother Nature or Earth itself. So you have to take care of it. Um, if you look towards being living off the credit card of Mother Nature all the time, had a linear system, so that's a system which is no longer sustainable. And so therefore we need to go to a circular economy. And what a circular economy does, it harnesses value. And for instance, it's organized more like an ecological system. So for instance, in an ecological system, the waste of one organism is the food of the other. It's a closed system and it cycles. And there are small cycles and big cycles, and it cycles like a natural system and it keeps itself in balance. Our economical system, which is more one that's been harnessing all the value sell off a product, and then try to make money out of it. And then if there's waste, yeah, it's no longer my problem because I sold the product. That's an oversimplification of the situation, of course. In a circular system, you're no longer going to see, okay, how I'm going to harness profits from that profit, the product going to sell. So now how I'm actually going to bring something to the table that actually brings value to the overall my customer base, uh, and can retain that value for a longer period of time. So that means that maybe I shouldn't go from a transactional point of view, but more to a relational point of view with my customers. But if you do that, that means that you're going to have to think again on what are you going to provide as a product or as a service? Is that something that's one-off, or is that something that you keep going within a system, or is that a product or a service that's designed for a way so that you can just keep it in a sort forever circular loop? So these are questions which is really interesting. And then you come to, okay, which business model am I going to use? Am I going for a business model which is, of course, as I explained earlier, transactional, or is the business model which is more relational, in which I can just bring the value to the customer that it needs, but also harness more value as the provider of that service or product? And it's a completely different way of thinking, and it has impact on the way you're going to bring your product to the market, because you probably have to think about the design of the product. How do I design a product so it can remain in a loop for a longer period of time? And how do I finance a product that remains longer in a loop for a longer period of time? So it has a fundamental impact on the way you're going to conduct your business.
Makes a lot of sense. So from an equipment finance standpoint, most of the time, the companies that we hear talking about that cyclical nature instead of the linear process are, captives, because they're linked to a manufacturer who is, creating that behind the scenes. What about, what's in that model for other types of equipment finance companies like banks or independents?
So again, also here, it's extremely important that you look towards the way you're going to finance it. So many companies that produce products, um, they have a cost structure. They have a bill of material, they have employees working for them, they need to develop IP, a lot of stuff, they need energy, it costs them a lot of money. And in order to be profitable, they kind of have to sell off the product. And this is where an extremely important role for a financer comes in, because he could actually finance that. So in a linear system, you will always try to have that transaction, and the financer could actually play the role which is more relational. What sets us apart from a standard financer? We buy the product from the producer and we deliver it to the user. So that means we still own the product. And as soon as that user, which is in a case our customer, is done with the product and it's returned to us, yeah, then we still need to harness the value. So we're not going to throw that product away. So for us, it's also important to say, okay, how are we going to give that product a second life? How are we going to make sure that we harness more value out of it? Because there must be a very important reason for a customer to step over to leasing, because eventually he needs access to a product, and he can do that by two ways. He can invest by himself, that's a capital investment, or he can lease it by an operational investment. And then, of course, you can do the math. What is more financially interesting for this customer? In leasing, he pays a lower amount of money for that product if he would invest it themselves. So, for instance, he would pay 80% of the product because the product remains with us. And then it's up to us after their use phase, that first use phase is, for instance, after 3 to 4 years, that we still harness the rest 20% plus a little extra. Otherwise, we can't be profitable. But it allows us to make sure, and because also we have the supply chain in place, to make sure that a product actually gets a second or a third life. An independent company who just buys its own IT, for instance, isn't able to reach that same supply chain position as we have. So we are really well positioned. That also sets us apart from standard financial companies because we actually own the stuff that we lease out. So eventually, yeah, what we do is we make sure that the maximum value out of that product is harnessed, which has a net positive impact on the ecological impact of that product. So because we maximize it, if that product would only be used, for instance, for 3 to 4 years and then be thrown away, well, that product actually can be used for 6 to 7 years, then we're the ones who make that possible, and therefore lowering your carbon footprint on a specific product.
So I wanted to go back to the three Ps that you talked about earlier. You mentioned that, often companies are thinking about, sustainability as a requirement or something that they have to do, and they're not looking at that profit angle of it. What would you say the biggest challenges those companies or the lessors that serve them face when they're trying to incorporate a sustainable model into their business operations?
I think the most difficult thing is to understand where they're losing value. So in the linear system, you have a huge amount of value leakage. And because we have been doing and conducting our business in such a manner for such a long time, we don't recognize that we lose a lot of value. And so the main thing, what is difficult for companies to understand is, okay, how can I harness value, which I don't even see that I'm losing? And that's where we come in and make sure to take that triple P perspective and first of all explain to them from, hey, there's value in the people that you have within your organization, and you make sure you keep them happy. Or if you want to attract new talents, you make sure you do good. You make sure that you have a license to operate. So having your ESG in place correctly is extremely important to be an attractive employer. Of course, you have demands from a compliant from a legislation point of view worldwide. So of course, I know that in the US there is a tendency that those laws are becoming less strict, but eventually, as you look to larger corporations, um, they have to kind of comply to the global legislations. And if they're more strict in Europe and in Asia, yeah, they kind of have to keep up to that level of compliancy. And it also has impact on their suppliers. So if you're doing business with a local supplier in the US, which is not a large company, yeah, most of the time, if they're in that supply chain, they also have to be on par to make sure that the product and services provided by those large companies are compliant. So although in the US there is this tendency that the laws are becoming a little bit less strict than, for instance, in Europe or in Asia, if they want to be a part of that global market, yeah, they kind of have to be compliant to what's happening in Europe and in Asia.
Okay.
So, and that also has impact on their supply chain, and that could be a local manufacturer in the US.
So you speak with executives around the globe, and as you mentioned, just because the United States is not, furthering a sustainable agenda at the government level right now, that doesn't mean that, companies here need to do the same. What are you seeing around the globe in terms of adoption of sustainability initiatives that lessors in the United States should be paying attention to?
Um, well, I think it's very important. So it doesn't say that the US politics right now, they don't move away from standing legislation.
Mm.
So um, I think so. People think, okay, the U.S. is no longer going to be sustainable anymore. And of course, the U.S. has strict environmental legislation as well. So only you see the tendency that they're thinking of, okay, let's make it, um, let's readjust and make sure that we don't bring legislation in place that's actually harmful for a profitable organization. That's something different. So there's a small nuance there. And most of the time that is explained, okay, the US stopped being environmental sound anymore, which is, I don't think is the case. But what is the case is that Europe and Asia are moving quicker. ahead, because they have, of course, understand why there is a need for those more strict legislation, because companies are not going to do it out of themselves, and we need to actually adjust to a situation where we can no longer just keep living off the, as I explained earlier, the credit card of Mother Nature. Um, so that's the first thing, that statement. And then can we go back to the question that you just stated?
Sure. Yeah. What should lessors here be paying attention to
Yes.
going on around the globe that maybe they don't have their eye on?
Well, first of all, they're in a unique position as a financer, but also as an owner of the product. And they bring value to their customers. Uh, as I explained before, you can take the triple P perspective. For instance, we provide access to new products. So giving our customers and their users access to the latest and the greatest. So that's something which helps to build your proposition. That's important. Eventually, if you give people access to the latest and the greatest, you make them more efficient as well. And everybody knows that AI is really big right now. So that also means that you need new tooling. In a circular economy, it's not about how long one user is using a specific tool. It's about how many users can you make use that specific tool for a longer period of time. So, for instance, if you're a high-end company, you want to have access to high-end PCs because your employees have to deliver a high-end value product. And maybe you want to switch them onto new PCs after 2 or 3 years, or even don't wait for 4 years, because then the PC becomes in a time that it's not, the user experience goes down, it's not up to par anymore. So we as a lessor enable shorter use periods, because we know we can get the second and the third life cycle somewhere else, for instance, in a consumer market. And these laptops are extremely valuable in a consumer laptop market, especially if they're more high-end laptops. So there's many things that a lessor can use to show, hey, I have a better proposition for you. By leasing products, we can bring your carbon footprint down for around 30%. And this is actually proven scientifically. And as we all know, and although the US is going less strict on the environmental agenda, all the large companies in the US have committed to SBTI, the Science Based Targets Initiative. And that means that they're going to lower their carbon footprint. And they put commitments on that. And we're talking about large organizations like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Walmart, PepsiCo, Procter and Gamble. The list goes on and on and on. And it's just not separate companies at all. All these companies have suppliers as well. So if you want to actually lower your carbon footprint, you have to search in your supply chain how you can get a supplier that supplies you with this. So, and this is one is the most important. We are a supplier of those companies as well. So if I go into a C-level room and I have to explain why they should go leasing, I first check what is their agenda. And if their agenda that they're SBTI committed, yeah, then they're going to have to lower their carbon footprint. So I have an incentive to say, hey, it's better for you to go to leasing. Hey, if you have top personnel in place that needs to be constantly delivering on its highest level, then you have to give them access to instruments which can provide that. And that means not buying a very cheap laptop, but maybe buy a little bit more expensive laptop that delivers that promise. And it doesn't mean that your procurement go up, because then you're thinking from a how do you call that? A pillar point of view, but you have to look all over. So, for instance, if I have an employee in place, and that employee costs me $100,000 per year, I'll make sure I'll keep that person happy. Because if that person is not happy with the tools that are provided, I can't harness the value that he actually and the potential he has in himself. If I provide him with super good tools and I make him happy, his efficiency goes up, and I'll maybe probably get the laptop for in this case in tenfold back in the first year. So it's all about being smart and where you put your money. So so this is what I would bring to what I explain to people in the C-suite. Um, don't focus just on the moment that you're going to buy a laptop, but focus on what is going to bring it for the whole organization and how it's going to fit in my supply chain and what are my strategic goals, and can I tick those strategic goals by making certain decisions in my procurement. And for instance, giving access over ownership allows you to fulfill one of those strategic goals, for instance, a net zero target, for instance.
What about companies that might not have that type of goal? What if they are not on board with, sustainability initiatives, but how could you convince them to get on board? What's an
Well, so in the triple P, there's also one thing which is called the profit.
Mhm.
And for them, the profit is the most important thing. I really like to align those three, people, planet, profit. But from a profit point of view, if you don't have to do capital investment, but you still want to have access to the product, then it will go to an operational investment. So that actually saves you a certain amount of money that you spread over a certain amount of years. And that means that you can allocate that value somewhere else in a place where you actually are really good in creating your own value in your market proposition. So that's a very easy one. You de-risk financially. You create a steady, you know exactly when you have to pay certain items. So your cash flow is more organized. It's not sitting on your balance sheet. So there's multiple advantages besides the sustainability story to do it. But I've never seen that in a C-suite. They all find sustainability an important factor. But what I think is most important, they're very, very eager to listen if you balance those out. So the environmental, the planet stuff, the profit stuff, and the people stuff. If you can just level those out and balance that out in a structured way, then they're very interested to listen, because then they suddenly realize, hey, it's all adding up and it's the whole value story. So I never speak of, oh, it's going to cost you this, or you have to prevent this ecological harm, or you have to make sure it's all about, if you talk about value, this is what we can create for you. A well-managed cash flow, making sure that you keep your capital and put it somewhere else, and you go to operational expense. And by the way, you lower your carbon footprint by 30%. And I hardly see any company these days that is not interested in sustainability, because everybody knows this is the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. But again, you have to balance it out. Don't focus only on, yeah, we have to save the environment and therefore we have to kill off our company from profits. And that, because that doesn't make any sense. So therefore I speak from, hey, you can be a company that be profitable, but also a company that does no harm. And by the way, you need employees, you need this and this and this. So it makes business sense that you take care of the environment where you're actually operating in. And of course, you have quarter goals. Of course, you have a year goal. Of course, you have a 5-year goal. But there's also, you have to look sometimes a little bit further, maybe up to 10 years or 15 years. And are you then still active and operating in a environment that is bringing value for yourself? Does that make any sense?
It does. It definitely does. It seems like a win-win-win situation when you explain it that way. Like, why would you not? Why would you
And
not?
that's why I think it's really important to understand the difference by linear versus circular.
Mhm.
It's like preventing value leakage, and it's focusing on value retainment. And then legislation is no longer a threat or something that you have to manage or that costs energy. No, it's an opportunity to see, okay, how can I grow my business even further or bring it further and be the smart one in the room? And this is what all the large companies are doing. So instead of looking at it, okay, I have to take care of and be reactive, you suddenly change the dice and you become proactive. And you can actually shape the organization in the way you think is best for your surroundings. And all these people have children. They want the best for their kids.
Mhm.
And all these organizations have employees running around. They don't want to work for a company that destroys. They want to work for a company that creates. And therefore, you need a different way of looking at it.
Definitely. So if you look out over the next like 3 to 5 years, how do you see the role of sustainability evolving in equipment finance?
So over the 3 to 5 years,
Hmm.
I think that what I actually hope is that sustainability as a word is going to go away.
Yeah.
And I also hope that, and that's of course, I think a bit of a too big of a hope. If we're not talking about circular economy as something that is far away and distant and the way to go, now circular economy is the way to go. This is how we organize our economy, and linear is just an old way which didn't harness all the value. So that's where I hope where it will go. And sustainability currently is, and especially in the last 10 years, sometimes often used as a buzzword, yeah, just as window dressing. And I would love to see that our economical systems understand that sustainability is a minimal requirement. So if I give presentations, yeah, we do a lot of great stuff. So I work. My role as a global lead sustainability is to make sure that our customers understand our value proposition, and mainly from a sustainability point of view. But within our organization, we have a sustainability office that makes sure that we act and operate in such a manner that it's within legislation and harnesses the greatest value for our point of view. So that means we have an ISO 14001. We are SBTI committed. We have an EcoVadis Platinum rating, so which is the highest 1% rating you can get. We have data protection ISO certifications all over. We are operative in 32 countries worldwide. So, but we have all things in place to make sure that we are sustainable ourselves. But I don't use it to say, okay, look how great we are. I say, no, this is a minimal license to operate to be active in our economical model. So if you don't have this in place, you should be ashamed of yourself, because then you miss out on the opportunity of doing great business. And it helps if I speak to customers, especially if they're also SBTI committed. I also make them aware of the fact that they think, no, that's something for the sustainability. No, I bring it to the table. Say, hey, you've decided to be SBTI committed, and it also means that you put your, sorry for my language, your ass on the line from a reputational point of view. And if you put your ass on the line, that means that you have to deliver. Well, we happen to be that supplier which delivers you that tool and finances for you that has the same goal. Let's come in alignment. And most of these companies have EcoVadis in place, which is the supply chain thing, and manage that from that point of view. So, yeah, doing the minimal things for the environment is for me a license to operate. And that's the next step to create value. And then I think, okay, what can I do more to bring more value to our customers? And customers love it. You know, they love buying your products and services if they know it has a positive impact on their surroundings.
So eventually it'll just be the baseline. That would be
Yeah,
that would be very nice.
yeah.
We're nearing the end of our time here. Any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't cover that you think is important?
Um, Yes, I think what's most important if you want to create more value for organization from a sustainable point of view, really look what the circular economy can bring for you. And don't think of circular economy as something like recycling, because that's actually where the lowest value is. Think of circular economy as which business model brings the most value for my customers and has a way of lowering the environmental impact. And if you can bring those two together, most of the time they have something that creates such a value that it's going to grow faster and leads to more business. One last statement. An apple tree doesn't make one apple. An apple tree makes tons of apples, and it makes too much of apples, so much apples that you don't need so much apples. So the linear economy is, okay, how can we do less, more for less? And the circular economy is, how can we create more and more? There is no less, there is only more. How can we create more business? How can we create more value? And I think those are two different ways of interpreting an economy. But you have to have the eye for the value. And that's I think the most important thing that we could end this podcast.
Well, it's great. I actually have an apple tree in my backyard that's kind of doing that, just that right now. It's,
Yeah,
it's overflowing with apples. So,
exactly. So take
yeah,
nature as your perfect advisor, and that's where circular economy's value lies as well.
definitely. Well, Allard, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been
Great.
great talking with you.
Thank you so much for your time and for your questions.
Yeah, thank you.